Before the start of the fourth stage of the Santos Tour Down Under, 8,100 cyclists took part in the mutual community ride over the same course between Norwood and Goulburn, 150 kilometres. For many of these riders, Paul, it would mean 7 or even 8 hours in the saddle.
And an impressive sight too from the first rider rolling through the starting gate, Phil. It took half an hour before the last riders actually managed to get themselves to the start line.
The riders heading out, as the main race would do, up towards Kangaroo Creek Reservoir, and they were soon thinning out as the boys on the front, who've been training for the event, put the pressure on. But it did make a remarkable sight.
And I think for everybody who participated, Phil, despite a tough day, they all enjoyed it.
And they got the first taste of the big win, which would shape this race towards the end. Back now to the start of the main event in Norwood, and yesterday's winner there, Manuel Cardoso, dreaming of what might be at the end of this day. The only leader of this race so far, Andre Greipel, signing in for another day in the ochre jersey.
Looking very confident before the start, but also seeming to enjoy his return here to the Santos Tour Down Under. Lance Armstrong always being requested for quotes from the press.
The start made, only 3 riders having abandoned the tour so far. And for the riders, again, another long ride out of town towards the race start proper of 11 kilometres before the red flag would come in and racing would commence.
Well, the reason for this was to get the riders and the race out of town as easily and safely as possible before unleashing them out onto the open road. But once the red flag came in, the race started in earnest.
An attack by Costa Viejo, one of the Euskaltel Euskadi riders, trying to take a few riders clear as they started the long winding slopes up through Kangaroo Creek to the reservoir at the top and onwards to the top of the first climb, and indeed the only climb of the day, of Fox Creek. Well, in this breakaway of 7 riders, one rider in the white jersey as leader of the Skoda King of the Mountains competition was Thomas Rohregger, and he was out to gain maximum points at the summit and increase his lead in the overall competition. Over in second place was David Kemp, who moved into second place in the mountains competition.
Well, the German seemed very happy with his move there to the front end of the pack, but the main field, despite the fact that they were riding along at an extremely high pace, seemed to be losing ground over the 7 leaders, hovering at around about 3 minutes behind.
As they raced on into Langhorne Creek, the special sprint here saw the French rider Ravard take it out. Third place went to Rohregger, a 1 second time bonus for him. He was moving closer to the overall leader of the race, Greipel.
All 7 men working very well together to maintain their lead for almost 130 kilometres. But once the race started to get just that little bit closer to the finishing town, the gap started to come down. 1 minute and 20 seconds. It still looked possible.
Getting clear after only 1 kilometre of the day's racing, the riders, when they approached Malang, were now at 114 kilometres. And the man in the centre, Rohregger, was out for the full bonus this time. 3 seconds for him, 4 gained. He was now only a few seconds behind Andre Greipel. But the field wiped them out, one by one, led by Team Radio Shack.
Yes, this was the time when the race started to get into the very blustery conditions, and all of a sudden a slight acceleration pushed a rather famous man off the front end of the main field. The teammate Thomas Vickers really put the hammer down, but I think what everybody was caught unawares of was the fact that Lance Armstrong had got himself into a 2-man group.
It was a brave, if perhaps not a well thought out move, because the riders now had turned into a very, very strong headwind. The roads were also extremely straight as they headed towards Goulburn, and although the strength of Armstrong and Vickers did open up a lead of nearly half a minute, the main field were always within their range.
I think it was the panic that set in behind, though, because the teams got themselves very organised and started to decimate the back end of the peloton, with lots of riders being left behind. But finally, once we got to the outskirts of the finishing town, the teams of the sprinters did manage to get themselves organised and get the lead-out train in line.
HTC Columbia, the team of the race leader Andre Greipel, were now trying to lead him to the line for a 3rd win in 4 days of racing, and they were doing a pretty good job. The team's other big sprinters like Robin McEwen, Graham Brown, Greg Henderson and Gert Stegmans were in the mix as well. But as they raced to the line, the final lead out coming from Tasmania's Matthew Goss, when he moved out the way, he was about to launch Greipel to his 3rd stage win of the week. No one, it seems, can outsprint this rider. Greipel was first, second was McEwen, third was Brown, fourth was Stegmans. But there was only one winner.
Andre, once again, what an incredible performance, not only by yourself but the whole team.
Yeah, the whole team. We said before that this crosswind to the finish, so we had to fight to get to the front, and we did. In the last 5Ks we always rode from the front and no one could pass us. I mean, that's a sign of strength.
Must make it very special to ride at the head of a team like this, and that gives that extra motivation in the last 200 meters.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole time from the start, Bert Grabsch rode from the front, then Hayden Ralston, Marcel Siebeck, and the end Michael Rogers, Bernie Eisel, and Matthew Goss. If you have riders like him, then no one can pass us.
Yes, they can't go wrong at the moment. HTC Columbia, so Andre Greipel leads this race by 20 seconds now over Robin McEwen.